While I make every effort to broadcast correct information, I'm also still learning. I will double check all my facts, but realize that healthcare is a constantly changing science and art. One doctor or healthcare provider may have a different way of doing things from another. I welcome any comments, suggestions, or correction of errors. I take no money from supplement or device companies. By listening to this podcast or reading this blog, you agree not to use this podcast or blog as medical advice or to treat any medical condition in either yourself or others, including but not limited to patients that you are treating. Consult your healthcare provider for any medical issues that you may be having. This entire disclaimer also applies to any guests or contributors to the podcast or the website. Under no circumstances shall any guests or contributors to the podcast or blog or any employees, associates, or affiliates of the Boss Body podcast be responsible for damages arising from use of the podcast or the blog. This blog or podcast should not be used in any legal capacity whatsoever, including but not limited to establishing the standard of care in a legal sense or as a basis for expert witness testimony. No guarantee is given regarding the accuracy of any statements or opinions made on the podcast or the blog.
What's up, guys? It's Dr. Tim Jackson with another episode of the Boss Body Podcast. Keto diet, ketogenic diet. Many of you have heard of it. It's becoming increasingly popular, has been for the past 5, 6, 7 years. So today we have a very special guest, Miss Maria Emmerich. Welcome to the show, Maria. Did I pronounce your last name correctly?
You did, but I would never get mad if you didn't. But thank you, Dr. Tim. It's an honor to be here.
Yeah, so I reached out to you a little over a month ago, and you jumped at the chance to be on the show. So thank you for that. Now, for the listeners, Maria has written 20, is it 20 or over 20 books?
There's over 20, but it's okay. At this point, I lost count.
Yeah, so when was your first book published, and how did you get into all this?
I was told I had PCOS when I was 16 years old, which being told you can't have your own children at that age is kind of like, boom, a big bomb goes off, right? And so I looked into what causes PCOS, and it was excess caffeine, sugar, and carbohydrates. And I worked at a coffee shop where I, ate all the things and drank all the coffee. And I was married before I could legally drink alcohol. But we started adopting 2 children because I told them, I don't really want to do the fertility thing. I don't care if anybody else wants to, but that's just not for me. And so we were adopting 2 children, and sadly, he lost his job. And I went to school for nutrition and exercise physiology, but I wanted to be a stay-at-home mom. So I was just a rock climbing guide until I was going to be a mom, and I was making like $8 an hour. So I didn't have any insurance. So when he lost his job, we basically, like, your adoption starts over because all the research they did about you, they have to do it again. So I was really upset at the time, and a friend said, why don't you write a cookbook about your recipes that you eat? Because at that time, I lost a bunch of weight, and I was still eating cinnamon rolls, just differently. And they're like, why don't you make a cookbook and help raise money for your adoption? And so I was like, hey, that's a good idea. And it helped me like put my love into like I could think about the boys because we were adopting 2 boys. And I could just focus on something else, like something happier rather than sad. And it really, it just like gave me a reason to wake up. And before you know it, Halle Berry has the books, and it's like, whoa,
Yeah, so tell us a little bit about that. I was reading that you cooked with Halle and that you write for her website. So
yeah. It was just, I think I was just hanging with my kids, and I got these messages like bing, 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 bing all over my phone. They're like, Halle Berry's talking about you on her Instagram. I'm like, what? I had no idea she was even keto. I had no idea she had my books, and she kind of opened up. Yes, I eat keto because she has type 2 diabetes, and that she only cooks for my books. And I was like, wow, what a compliment, right? And I wanted to thank her. So I reached out, and we wrote, like a card for her, just saying like, this all started for my children. And I just wanted her to know that. And she called and she's like, hey, you want to do some cooking things? I'm like, yeah. And she could be such a diva, and she's not. She's so sweet, so sweet.
Well, that's awesome. And so when was your first book published? Like back in what year? Do you remember?
I should probably look it up. The years are going by so fast. It was well before I had children, and they're now 12 and 13. Because we had a lot of bumps along the way. So it was almost about like 18 years ago now. Yeah.
Wow. So you were really ahead of the curve in terms of the keto diet. I mean, now a lot of people are talking about it, but you were one of the OGs of the keto.
No, jeez. I was a crazy lady. Everybody was like, what? What? It doesn't, I can't, this is exactly opposite of what my doctor is telling me to do. And I was like, just give it a month, see what happens. And they would feel so much better. They would get so much like the getting off blood pressure medication. The reason I started it too is I had depression, I had IBS, I had acid reflux, as well as PCOS. And all of that went away. And so even though, I'm a stubborn German girl. So when people told me I couldn't do it, because this was 26 years ago now, I was in high school and everyone was like, what is she doing? And I was like, just try me. And it just made me want to do it better and harder, and not slip up, because people really, they get triggered when you try to change your diet. Like if you try to cut sugar out, your mom makes you your favorite pie. And it's like, I'm sick. I don't want to be sick anymore. And right. I had to, just say, I'm sick. Do not make this stuff for me anymore. It's hard enough.
So. Absolutely. And how have you seen things evolve from when you first started writing about keto? Now there's carnivore. Can you kind of let's back up for a minute. For listeners who may not be familiar with the macros of the ketogenic diet, can you kind of just cover the 30,000-foot view?
Well, I guess there's a lot of misinformation. People think that it's a high-fat diet, but 99% of people that come to me want to lose weight. And so if you have a lot of fat on your body, you don't have to eat a lot of dietary fat, because the fat on your body will be used for fuel. People mistakenly think that you just have to eat a lot of fat, and you don't. And so for a little bit of time, I got sucked into this, it's a high fat diet, like too much protein turns into sugar. No, absolutely not. So I have a free macro calculator for anybody who wants to find out their macros, because it's very personal and it depends on your lean mass, which is your muscle mass. And you want to get like 0.8 times your lean mass at least in protein. That's on the lower end. You can go over that. And people are like, oh, that's a lot. It's really not. It's like 2 chicken breasts, or, and it can be more delicious than chicken breasts too. So I'm putting that out there. But then you want to use fat as a lever. If you are lean and maybe you're an athlete, you're going to turn that fat dial up, and if you're an extreme athlete, that's your energy source, because protein's not a good energy source, and you're not eating carbohydrates for energy. So the fat will be your energy. So that's just how that works. It's like, focus on protein, lower the carbohydrates as low as you can, and use fat as your lever. That's how I describe the macros.
Okay, great. And so you mentioned athletes. So the glycogen stores, like I see people drinking Gatorade, they're like, I got to replenish my glycogen stores, Dr. Tim. Can you touch on that and why that's nonsense?
Well, you only have about 2,000 calories of glycogen in your liver and your muscles at one time. That's why when people, besides me, when you run marathons, I don't do this, but when you run marathons, they'll bring goo with them, or like the Gatorade. However, if you train your body to switch to be a fat burner, you basically have an infinite amount of calories as fat to use for energy. But people mistakenly think, I need carbs for energy. No, fat is actually a longer lasting energy source. If you've ever been to a marathon or run a marathon, you notice at mile 20, they have the wall. And that's where your body technically should be stopped working. You shouldn't be able to run past 20 miles. But the last 6 is endurance. And you'll notice at mile 20, more men will start walking rather than women. And the reason that is women have a better switch at burning fat than men can. It's harder for them to switch. It's not that they can't, but if they're used to using carbs for fuel, it's hard to switch over. But it's totally possible. When people do start the ketogenic diet, they'll say, oh, I have the keto flu. I like to call it the carb withdrawal, because let's not blame keto. Let's blame the carbohydrates, because carbohydrates retain water. And when you eliminate all those carbohydrates, along goes the water loss, which means you're going to have lower energy. You might have heavy legs walking upstairs. Sometimes you get headaches, low moods. It's not that keto caused that. It's that you're not replenishing that water loss. And you can't just drink more water because you're just going to urinate more. You're going to need to get in those electrolytes and sodium. Salt is not the devil that people think. You can die without sodium. So, and that's the thing, like if you're eating, like me, I don't eat anything from a package. So if, steak doesn't have salt, eggs don't have salt, like scallops don't really have salt. So you have to like really add a lot, and probably add it to some water too.
Right. Absolutely. And so when people say, because I hear this all the time also, that, the neurons in the brain, they have to have glucose for fuel.
So there are some parts of your body that need glucose. Your brain doesn't. This is why, like Alzheimer's, the brain is no longer using glucose for fuel. And so the ketogenic diet is very powerful in helping Alzheimer's. So let's not say that, but there are certain things that do need glucose. And so this is where protein enters. This is where protein can enable your body to be ketogenic and still work amazingly well. And if you think about like the Neanderthals, like they lived off of meat, like they were basically carnivores. So like their bodies made it, they evolved to be, humans. And so we can do that too. There's essential fatty acids, there's essential amino acids, which are protein. There's no essential carbohydrates. There's none.
Right.
So
yeah. And one thing people will say, oh, well, the gluten-free stuff, it's a fad. But in all my years of practicing, I've never seen a gluten deficiency on someone's lab report.
No, I think that's a big problem. I'm grateful that I went through my, beginning stages before there was this gluten-free rice or gluten-free breads and gluten-free pastas. And, because when people switch to the gluten-free products, you're getting about, 50 more calories and carbohydrates than you would because they're made with rice, which is more calories and more carbohydrates than like a white flour would be. But they think that they're doing themselves a good job. But for me, there wasn't any of that stuff. So you just didn't eat bread. You didn't eat pasta,
Right.
Yeah. Like, I think we're just recreating some of the Frankenfoods to be healthy, and it's not. But be careful if you go to like Costco too and get, keto bread. It's just junk. Stay away.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I'm sure it's loaded with glyphosate and other chemicals that disrupt our microbiome.
Yeah.
When you talk about switching from carb as a fuel source to fat as a fuel source, how do people go about getting the metabolic flexibility so that they can do that? And how do they monitor it?
Most people rip the Band-Aid off and do it entirely. It's not like having lowering the carbohydrates in order to become keto. Just rip the Band-Aid off, and adding in those electrolytes will help you not have such an intense flu. Like, I don't want to scare people from doing it. It's just your energy is not going to be as great probably, but at the same time, how like I remember having like a big old lunch of like pizza or whatever, and then feeling like, oh, I need a nap. You don't need that anymore. And I'm on no caffeine. I'm on no carbohydrates, and my energy is like through the roof. But it takes a little bit of time for your body to learn. So within 2 weeks, you're going to be, ketogenic. Within like a day, you can be ketogenic. It's just, but when you have that higher energy, it's going to take some time.
Absolutely.
Like, don't plan on running a marathon next month, right?
Yeah. In general, from what I see, I don't recommend running marathons anyways for a multitude of reasons.
I don't anymore. I stopped because it really took a toll on my body for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. And, the issue is today we have so many toxins and stealth pathogens that our internal stressors are through the roof. And then people will go out and try to run 12 miles and, it's just another stressor added onto their body. What about the microbiome? So, I do a lot of stool testing, and, you got to have those short chain fatty acids, which come from carbs. But what say you in terms of the health of the microbiome, in terms of being on a long-term keto diet?
So one of the books I'm going to send you is my carnivore book. And that explains the microbiome and how it shifts rapidly within one day of switching, and how it prioritizes what you're eating for digestion. And do I care if I have the microbiome to digest gluten anymore or carbohydrates? No, because I don't eat them. So it's a really fascinating chapter. My husband actually wrote that chapter about how the microbiome shifts really rapidly within a day of how your body is eating. And honestly, like when a doctor asks me what I'm eating, I don't say keto, I don't say carnivore, but I say I eat nothing from a package. I don't eat any sugar, including honey, agave, or any of that false health sugar. I don't drink any caffeine. I don't drink any alcohol. I focus on, lean proteins, and they're like, oh, that's really healthy, right? But if you'd say I eat carnivore, they're like, oh, you're gonna die of a heart attack.
Yeah.
But
exactly.
No, I think that you'll really love that chapter. It's about the microbiome. My husband could explain it better. You might love to have him on your show, but he's the scientist behind the madness.
Awesome. And so I haven't had a chance to look up all your books, but they're
Okay.
all on the keto or carnivore nutritional templates. Are they all cookbooks, or?
They're not all cookbooks. I have some nutritional books. One's called Keto Adapted. That's like one that people really love. But as we evolved, that's the thing, like as you start your diet change, it's not going to look the same 5 years from now. It's not going to look the same 10 years from now. And as I've learned about different nutrients and where the anti-nutrients are, we evolved to be more carnivores, partly because it's easier, partly because nutrient dense and there's no anti-nutrients like oxalates and things like that. My husband also suffered from Lyme disease. He got from a tick. And with the Lyme disease pain, he was searching for how to get rid of that, and getting rid of all the vegetables made him go from bedridden to like functioning amazingly. So I would say like that was a huge piece of us becoming carnivore, and we like the food.
Yeah, absolutely. With the oxalates, those are serious because I work with a lot of people who have mold toxicity, yeast overgrowth, and all of those produce oxalates, on top of if you're consuming, a lot of green juices, or you're going to the juice shop and, getting kale, then you're, overloading your kidneys, your joints, you're disrupting a lot of your physiology. But there are others like lectins, for example. Talk about a little bit about why they're harmful and why we shouldn't have them.
Well, I just want to say thank goodness for doctors like you, because most of the doctors are thinking that you should do the green juice and skip the steak and, that type of stuff. But so oxalates are like little crystals. And a lot of times when you eliminate the oxalate, so if you've been doing a lot of kale or green juice, things like that, and you stop that and become a carnivore, you might notice oxalate dumping. Sometimes we've seen them come out of skin. You might get a sty in your eye. That's what happened to me when I was younger. I would get styes when I was, transitioning to keto from my past diet. But in the end, it's a good thing to get rid of them. You might notice kidney stones, but it's good to get rid of them because it's going to get rid of pain, inflammation. Like, you do not want those oxalates in your body because they are like little crystals. Kiwi is very high in them. Potatoes, nuts and seeds, that type of stuff.
So what say you about the antioxidants in fruit, and people who say you have to have fruit for the antioxidants?
Well, Dr. Yeats has been very influential in my, knowledge about this, thanks to her. As we know, like too much antioxidants is bad also. And if you're not eating the inflammatory diet, you don't need those antioxidants either. But all of those foods with the antioxidants have anti-nutrients. So like, it's like, what are you're going to get the anti-nutrients with the, if I put a steak in front of you, a plate of blueberries, or a plate of kale in front of you, which one do you think is the most nutrient dense?
Steak.
Because you're smart. You ask my mom and she's like, probably the blueberries, right? No, it's not. The steak is. And so why not just eat that delicious nutrient dense food that doesn't have anything bad in it for you and has all the things good in it for you that the kale and the blueberries, the anti-nutrients that they have.
Can you talk a little bit about the main differences between carnivore and keto?
Carnivore is an extension of keto in my mind. So, keto, a proper keto diet. It's funny because I had a client lose 250 pounds and she was featured on the cover of Women's World magazine. And on the cover, I think I have it over there somewhere. It says, Twyla lost 250 pounds on ultra keto. It's like, it's not ultra keto. It's just real food, It's none of the, Twyla eats nothing from like Duncan's High keto brownies or those keto breads I was telling you about. She eats real food. But to me, that's what those products are ruining the keto diet name. So I don't even like to be saying that I do keto in a way, but keto would be, like I said, you lower the carbohydrates, focus on protein, the fat is your lever. And then carnivore is where you eliminate the plants. So if you're doing some low carb vegetables, you eliminate those. You eliminate the spices because the spices can cause. I always ask, what is your why? Because if you want to do carnivore for weight loss, it's not always the best way. But if you're doing it because you have autoimmune issues, Lyme disease, mold, those types of things, I think carnivores are great. That's what I included in the book Carnivore, because what is your why is also going to determine what level you do. Because there's level 1 carnivore, which is meat and salt. It's just meat, beef, and salt. Level 2 would be where you add in seafood, maybe some poultry. Level 3 would be where you add in some eggs and dairy, but those two can be common allergens for people. So, even though they are carnivore, they come from an animal, they can cause autoimmune issues to flare up.
So have you worked with a lot of clients who are dealing with autoimmune/neuroimmune issues, whether it's lupus, rheumatoid arthritis, things like that, who switch to a keto diet and see substantial changes?
Off all medication, it's mind-blowing. Like the testimonies that I get I love it because they're so inspirational. I don't even ask for them. They'll just be like, hey, we worked together and I just kept going and now I'm off, 5 medications and my pain is completely gone. And I worked with a pharmacist about 10 years ago and I always ask, are you taking any medication when I first start with someone? And they said, no, I know that every prescription I write is a little bit of poison. And I was like, hey, at least you said it, not me, but it's true, people worry about like meat in the environment. We should be worried about the pharmaceutical companies dumping all of that toxins into the environment. Like if we get people off of medication, that's like a win-win in so many ways.
Oh yeah, I mean, I've lost friends and relationships over, my stance on the pink ribbon campaign, because if you look at, who's behind it, the companies, I forget which pharmaceutical company, but they also are investors in companies that dump endocrine disrupting chemicals in the environment. So, it's the fox guarding the hen house. And I don't think we need any more awareness. Everyone and their brother and sister are aware. We need to find the cause, occasionally a cure, but mostly the cause. Because if you're not looking for the cause, it's just going to manifest some other way.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. And so what's the best way for someone with a neurodegenerative disorder such as Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, ALS to get started with you or working on a ketogenic diet?
Well, I'd be honored to work with anybody, but if they just want to, I would say Alzheimer's is going to be a bit different because like Alzheimer's, or if someone has seizures or epilepsy, then the higher ketone number makes a difference. Because this is a big mistake people do, like, oh, higher ketones mean better fat burning. They think that ketones automatically means that you're losing weight. This is not true. That just means that you have a lot of fuel in your body, okay, to store. So if you have Alzheimer's or epilepsy, higher ketones do matter. So I usually moderate the protein, lower that down a little bit, and increase the fat, because higher ketones will keep the seizures away, and higher ketones will help that brain activity more. Okay, so you don't need, and because like I was saying, your brain is no longer using glucose for fuel. And so in that case, your macros would be a little bit different. And that's why my calculator asks, what's your why? Because if it's weight loss, then the macros will be different than if you're trying to not have seizures anymore.
Right. And what about people who are gym rats and who, are trying to build muscle, especially guys, and they do the pre-workouts that might be loaded with carbs, or they do the peri-workout with maybe some amino acids, but lots of sugar for glycogen? How do you sort of work with them and get them to get through their workouts without needing the carbohydrates?
You can build muscle without any carbohydrates. And there's a lot of keto groups out there proving this wrong. Keto carnivore type groups like Keto Gains, where they are massive dudes and women, and they don't eat any carbohydrates. It's just for fueling your workout, you need to focus on electrolytes before and afterwards. And that was a big mistake that I did in the beginning. I didn't focus on sodium or zinc or potassium, magnesium. Those are huge proponents to your energy, to building muscle. Like people really, if you don't like look at your potassium numbers, that's a huge one of causing you to lose some muscle mass too. So that. Absolutely. And I love amino acids for a variety of reasons. But you don't even have to do that if you focus, because amino acids come from protein, so get your protein in. Like for bodybuilders, a whey shake or something like that would be just fine, because that's going to quickly get into that bloodstream. But if somebody's trying to lose weight, I try to stay away from that. So it just depends on your goals.
Gotcha. And is there a particular ketone meter? You mentioned testing the ketones and the high ketones.
Right.
That you recommend?
I would say, like, if your goal is weight loss, focus on your macros. You don't have to worry about your ketone numbers. But if you are, focus on like Alzheimer's, epilepsy, checking your ketones can be helpful. Stay away from urine testing, because those will only work in the beginning, because it basically tells you if you're hydrated or not. So people are like, no longer in ketosis, like, and even though they're doing the same thing, it's not true. They're not testing beta hydroxybutyrate. There's different types of ketones that are testing, and it's basically hydration. You could do a blood meter where you prick your finger. Those are a little, pricier. I do like BioCoach. They can test your ketones as well as your glucose. So, that can be helpful. But the thing is the people that I wish that would test their glucose with, like, the blood sugar and stuff, are people that are like teenagers eating massive amounts of carbohydrates or something, or adults that are just, not thinking about it, just eating the standard American diet. Those are the people I wish that would be like, oh my gosh, because they have no idea how like sky high their blood sugars are going. But
absolutely. And so it seems like you would run out of stuff to talk about in terms of the keto diet, but you've been going and going and going like the Energizer Bunny of authors. So what has evolved? What do you see today that you wouldn't have predicted 15, 18 years ago?
I never expected it to get as popular as it has been, which has been a blessing and a curse, I will say, because there's a lot of misinformation out there, and I'm like, oh my word, like, why you can't say that, but I'm also grateful for the changes things have happened. I wrote a book with Halle Berry called Sugar Free Kids. It's really a keto kids cookbook, but people are like, keto kids, they'd freak out. But if you say sugar free kids, everybody's like, oh yeah, kids shouldn't have sugar like they do now.
Right.
So I love that book, but a lot of adults that don't even have children say that's their favorite one. I'll make sure to send that one to you. But I just love that, like, parents will message me and they're like, I never thought I'd get my kid off sugar, and they watch my boys try different foods and stuff on our YouTube channel, and they're like, they were inspired by Micah and Kai to not eat the candy anymore, or this and that. And I'm like, I make sure to tell my boys, I'm like, you guys are pioneers. You are changing other kids' lives, because they're getting to the age where they can make their own decisions, but I want them to feel empowered to help other people stay or get healthy.
What's something that you know today that you wish you would have known, say 10, 12 years ago?
Probably that vegetables are not the bomb, that you do not need fiber to poop. Like people think, oh, like I get constipated on the keto diet. It's not because you're not eating fiber. Fiber is actually a menace and causes more constipation. And if you think about newborn babies, they don't get any fiber and they poo all the time, right?
Right.
But most people, they jump on the ketogenic diet and they eat a bunch of cheese and dairy and nuts, both of which are very constipating. So if you get rid of those and focus on protein and things like I was mentioning, a lot of my books are dairy and nut free for that reason. It's not an issue. So I would say like the whole fiber myth and the oxalates and stuff. There's a really great book called The Fiber Menace about how, if you think about like when people have Crohn's, colitis, or diverticulitis, what's the first thing the doctor says?
Get rid of the fiber.
Get rid of the fiber. But we're all thinking it's so good for us and causing a lot of damage to our gut and microbiome that maybe we should not have it.
We're barbecuing a lot of sacred cows here today on the Boss Body podcast. So I'm sure you might get some nasty messages. I'm sure I'll get some. But by the way, do you get those people who are, I have colleagues who are, like Dr. Jack Cruz. He's gotten messages from people who were a little unstable, who were maybe addicted to carbs and just very adamant about, we got to have a lot of carbs.
Yeah. The vegan community is strong. It's funny because the carnivores that I know and love, they're not out looking for vegans to make fun of. However, the vegans love to pick on us and make fun of us. And like, who's maybe having the chemical imbalance here? I don't know. I don't know. Absolutely. I feel like I don't have the time nor the energy I don't like to make fun of people. But they sure seem to like to do that.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you so much, Maria, for the work that you're doing. Thanks for taking the time out of your busy schedule. I know you just got back from retreat, and hopefully we can have you back on in the future. We're going to post all your links, but quickly, where can people find you to get more information about working with you?
Well, thank you, Dr. Tim. Make sure to give me your address so I can ship you all those books. But if you go to ketomaria.com, you can find information about my retreats. If you want to come to Croatia or Italy or one of those with me, there's free information there. I have thousands of free recipes on my blog, but if you want to work one-on-one with me, you could also find the links there. If you go all the way to the bottom, you can find my cooking YouTube videos. So tons of free information, but that's where you can go, ketomaria.com.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Maria. Keep up the great work, and we'll talk again soon.
Thank you. It's been an honor.